Welcome to a special event to mark today, 15th of November, the Day of the Imprisoned Writer. We'll be reflecting on two imprisoned poets, one in Turkey, one in India, in the company of a number of other well-known writers who'll also read some new work inspired by or addressed to these imprisoned poets.
Things that are not here. There are no kids scaling back walls to skip school, no human bond of good, making friendship from mere words. There are no stones for throwing stones, no flowers that pool dew, no rivers overflowing the map, no fresh-baked smell of sesame bread to summon up a crowd. There are no women of selflessness and beauty, no possibility to stretch out on grass, test the constancy of sky. There is no candle, just as there is no lamp. No darkness, there is absolutely no darkness. There are no turnings of the seasons, no eclipses of the moon, no earth, no plants in their simple elegance, no cat's paws, no sweat-drenched headlong of a horse, no curtains for the breeze to lift, no mouldering bunches of grapes. Life separated from the sun. There's no direction here, but there is a way out, always a way out.
That was Things Are Not Here by İlhan Çomak. Caroline Stockford is a translator, poet and human rights activist from North Wales who has studied Turkish literature and has translated much of İlhan Çomak's work. Caroline, tell us, who is İlhan Çomak and why is he where he is, and how did you become involved with him and his campaign?
Well, John, İlhan is Turkey's longest serving student prisoner. He's now aged 49. He is Kurdish. He writes in poetry in Turkish, and he was arrested as a geography student in Istanbul when there was a crackdown in the 90s on the Kurds and leftist people. He was tortured for 19 days in a torture centre very badly, and at the end of that 19 days, he signed a false confession to say that he'd lit forest fires near Istanbul in the name of the PKK and had been involved in other activities. İlhan maintains his innocence, and he was given a death sentence for the alleged crime of separatism, which was then commuted to life. It went to the European Court, came back. He ended up 22 years in pre-trial detention, and the poor man has now been 27 years in prison. And he survives. He's in solitary confinement, and yet he's written 9 books of poetry. The 9th is going to be published in September. I beg your pardon, in a couple of months, I should say, near Christmas time. So his 8th book was published in 2019 and won the Senor Sezer Prize for Poetry in Turkey. And he writes very beautiful nature poetry. And I got hold of one of his books about 5 years ago, and I work as Turkey advisor for PEN Norway, and I'm a member of Wales PEN Cymru and the PEN family. And I started a campaign for world poets to write with İlhan. I thought it would be great to send poems from famous poets into prison. And İlhan, lo and behold, he's replied to every single poem, and he's writing back to them.
Yes, there's this this remarkable project, this kind of what we might call a call and response project, whereby poems are called for by you, sent to him, translated, and then he writes back, if I can put it that way. That is remarkable. How do you organize that, Caroline? How does it work?
Well, with a lot of effort in a way, because translation is involved, and the poetry translation, as you'll know very well, is an art and can take a long time. You can spend as long as you like on translating a poem. You'll never quite reach perfection. So what we do is PEN Norway pays for poetry translators to work with us, and we have workshops. We do drafts that we share with one another. Then we have a Zoom workshop with people, and we translate the poems of Irish, Welsh, American, poets from all over Europe and the islands of Great Britain, and we translate them into Turkish. They are then sent taken into the prison by a remarkable woman called İpek, who is İlhan's Mackenzie friend, which means she has power of attorney and can visit him every week. Because we have to speed up the process, because to send them from here would take 4 weeks. Then the guards will quarantine them for 2 weeks, check them for any sort of dissident sentiments or any propaganda or anything they consider dangerous, and then finally give them to İlhan. So we use İpek to take them in and out of the prison, and it's wonderful that these words we can reach him, and he's really so very happy that he's in contact with great poets in the world.
It's a remarkable thought to think that there are prison guards in Turkey reading poetry by people from all over the world. But Caroline, I think you have spoken to a number, and if I can use the word, recruited a number of Irish poets into this project, the Call and Response. And one of those is the poet and essayist, and indeed sailor, Theo Dorgan, who has written a poem called Lone Voyager. Could you give us a sense of what it's like to hear that in Turkish? I don't know if could you read it to us in Turkish? And maybe give us an experience of what it would be like for İlhan to hear that poem when it is read by him or read out to him.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Theo's poem, indeed, a lot of the Irish poets' poems are really very beautiful and moving. And İlhan does like this beautiful nature poetry. And I know he'll be so moved. He has Theo's poem with him at the moment, and we're waiting for his response. I will read it in Turkish, and Turkish, as is Irish and Welsh, has more rules of harmony, and it sounds, well, you may hear, it flows quite nicely in Turkish. So this is, it was translated by İpek Uzman, Lone Voyager. Yalnız yolcu, İlhan'a. Kayık gece boyunca ilerliyor, dengeli ve emin. Kırıp dümeni geçiyorum içeri, açıyorum GPS'i. Google Earth'te buldum hapishanenin tam koordinatlarını, bu noktadan, tam uzaklığını suların dalgalanan koynunda. Oku hareket ettirip belirliyorum rotayı. Güvertede gene el pusulasıyla yelken çadırtayıp dolarken konumlandırıyorum kendimi. Kalbimin derin bir bölmesinden nefesimi bir rıza bağlıyorum ve aydan sektiriyorum. Kıvrılıyor ve düştüğü yerde çıplak bir parçada mavi ışıklı susuz beton üstünde bir avlu, yüksek beyaz duvarların derinliğinde bir çiçek, mütevazılıkla durgun havada ayakta duruyor. Çağırıyorum sessizliğin sürüklenen sisinden 3 damla çiğ. Narince düşsünler sarı taç yapraklarına, sonsuz zarafetle kaysınlar ta köküne.
I got Google Earth and GPS, so I think I knew I was with a sailor, but I'm afraid that the rest of it went to I missed. But the way you read it was so beautiful; it sounded so musical, and I'm very grateful to you, Caroline. And now here's Theo Dorgan to explain how he came to write the poem and to read his poem Lone Voyager in English.
When Caroline Stockford got on to me first and told me about İlhan's situation, and then told me that extraordinary story about how he's trying to keep a small flower alive in a tiny bare concrete exercise yard, I had the germ of the poem immediately. And then, as is the way of things, poems, if you get the germ or the nexus of a poem, it'll go ferreting around in the ruins of your mind and find something to chime with. And I remember the story about 2 elderly Australian sailors coming up through the Southern Ocean, up through the roaring 40s, idly discussing one night, wondering how far they were from any other human beings. One of them had a sudden brainwave and looked directly overhead where the space station was passing over and said, they're only about 100 miles away. It was maybe 1,000 miles to Cape Town at this stage. So they got onto Cape Town radio and got the frequency for the space station and called them up and got them. So for a couple of nights while their course was intersecting the orbit, they used to chat to the lads in the space station. And that, for some reason, that surfaced and connected to that little germ of the poem. And I thought, well, you know, we can send signals now, signals through the ether to people in all kinds of different ways. And that's what gave me the framework for this poem, Lone Voyage.
Other Irish writers, and maybe you just give us a sample of them. I know we have some Irish writers ready to read for us, but maybe you just read a sample of some short poems that you've received from other Irish writers and introduce them, if you wouldn't mind.
Yes, of course, John, I'd be delighted to. So the first one is by A Letter for İlhan by Nell Reagan. I would send you the horizon folded in the crease of this page. Now a gesture of the sea that rushes from it. Now the deep bow of sky toward it. Home resides in this line between, holding its open gaze. And this poem is called Dream of the Tree by Leanne Quinn for İlhan. The dream of the tree looks the same at the beginning as it will at the end. Insects burrow the dark, dream in the soil. The dream reaches the roots of the tree that is not burning. The tree is not dreaming in the way the insects dream, or the other animals that are dreaming in the forest. Shelter is not the same as hiding. Fire not the same as burning. The tree's dream can often be disturbed by an axe or a knife carving a human name. The tree notes the knife as it notes the insect bite at the edge of a leaf. But the tree cannot be expelled from its dream the way people are. The dream of the tree is a dream of any season, of any forest, of any flame.
That's a wonderful poem, wonderful poem.
It is a beautiful poem, isn't it, indeed? And finally, a very short poem by Celia Dufresne. For months now, I have searched for words to send you, having forgotten that what is said is less important than the saying of it, which, when well-intentioned, forms a cloud shadow that changes the landscape, be it the hillside of bygone days or the future gorse out on the island, turned to deepest gold.
That's the work of Celia Dufresne, as read by Caroline Stockford. Today, 15th of November, the day of the Imprisoned Writer, is also the first anniversary of the newly constituted Irish Pen na hÉireann. We launched on this day last year, and we're proud to have the President, Michael D. Higgins, as our patron. If you're interested in becoming a member, please visit our website, which is www.irishpen.com, where you can see details of our wide-ranging involvement in matters relating to writing and human rights. Well, somebody who needs no introduction in relation to writing and human rights is the writer, novelist, and former minister, Liz McManus. Liz, you were active in writing about and to İlhan Çomak, and perhaps you'd explain how you came to write the poem that you wrote for İlhan, and then maybe read it for us. Liz, welcome.
Thank you, John. Well, first of all, I think we have to remember that this young man has been in prison for 27 years. I had difficulty getting my head around it. It made me think, though, how extraordinary it was that he was able to transcend that experience. He has said himself, and I'll quote, "I work extremely hard. Inside this cordoned world, surrounded by walls, I work hard to hear the voice of poetry in everything." That's the end of the quote. And I think it was such a startling kind of approach to life, an extraordinary spirit that he has. I wrote a poem in response. I'll read it first in English, and then thanks to Éireann Gwibna and Éireann Hanlún, then in Irish. It's very short.
Right.
To İlhan Sami Çomak. Each day walking beside the sea, I think of what it means to be unfree. A winter sea can terrorize the shore and put at risk the trawlerman and sailor. Their choice is stark. They must be brave until the sea settles again, wave on wave. In a Turkish prison, you're braver still. Long years have failed to break your will. Inside you, a secret place survives. the cosmos where your poetry thrives. The İlhan Sami Çomak. A siúl gach lá cos farige, saolia mar tá den dír. Tigla farige gíomhach an clodach a scanrú. Mar nélach agus íscra a chur I mhuil. Rá acu ní mór de bheith cróga, go ditan an airge ríis, tan chun. I brísún sa Turk, tá tusa níos cróga fós. Bliana fada níor hep de visnach. Maran onad, áit rúnda, cosmos, the quid filiata.
Good, Liz, and thank you both for your own work and for Eilish ní Gcuimhne's translation. And it's great to hear English, Turkish, and Irish in the one program. That's wonderful. I don't know what İlhan will make of it in Irish, but maybe he'll hear it at some stage. So, Caroline, can we just come back to you, because I think one of the projects that you engage with İlhan about is a collaborative effort whereby you make poems together. Is that something that you've done? I'm trying to imagine how that would be done across the world, but I suppose while it might be done if people had emails and so on, it strikes me as being a bit more complicated if one of you is in prison.
Absolutely, and if one of you is a sort of a beginner poet too, I asked him if he would like to write poetry with me, and we decided that we would do half a poem each, so that one of us would start a longish stanza of 8 lines or so, and also to ask to pose a question, some kind of what would look like a rhetorical question, but it's something that the other poet could latch onto. So far, İlhan has completed his 20 first halves, and I'm actually lagging behind, which is unforgivable. And so I need to hurry up and finish. So we'll have 40 in the end. They're written in Turkish, and then I translate them back into English. So the one that you'll hear today is may need a little polishing because it's not the final English original or the final English poem, if you like.
So this is what we'll hear are 2 stanzas. One by you and one by İlhan, translated from Turkish back into English. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Great. Okay. Well, maybe you take us through them. Have you agreed on a title for the poem? I'm trying to imagine 2 poets collaborating. It's difficult enough for one poet to write a poem, but the idea of 2 of them trying to write one together is a remarkable achievement if you manage it.
Yes, I must say I've kind of skipped that duty at the moment. I've just taken lines from the poems themselves and used them as the title.
Okay.
When we finish, I will write to him and ask him what he
okay.
would like.
But it has a working title at present, has it?
It does. It's called Incidence of Joy.
Great. Okay, let's hear it.
Incidence of Joy. I entered your words like a storybook and got lost in the forest of meaning. I found the clearing steeped in sunshine, and there I saw your words in a spring pool. They swim like white fish, light particles, stretching to transparency. I swam in your poems and was renewed. To be with all and one is an instant revolution, bloodless, painless, a timeless transformation. You are so too, and so is poetry. Space is between us and art. In the endless meadows, I feel constrained, but there's a whole world in you. Your view, 4 walls. Is not the great world a cage for the closed-minded?
Excellent. Swim like fish. Your words swim like white fish. That's a wonderful image. And then, Caroline, so the next verse or stanza is İlhan's response to and collaborative effort, and maybe you'd read that for us also in English again, please. Yeah.
Yes, of course. This is İlhan's response. I'll finish with the end of my one and go into İlhan's if you like.
Sure.
Space is between us and art. In the endless meadows, I feel constrained. There's a whole world in you. Your view, 4 walls. Is not the great world a cage for the closed-minded? And İlhan's. I am purified by memories, with a kernel from the fruit I stole in childhood. I will knock down all the walls. Peaches, plums and nectarines, many a cherry. The original revolution began with love, with knowing the first wet taste of pears in my mouth, with the tenderness of how I miss my mother, touching my forehead, my hair. My words have come out of the sun. Like a horse that parts the tide of crowds, like the wind swaying drunk behind a kite, and the unpassing sorrow of my sock when it steps in water. I multiply it, multiply and renew time. I write myself, the doveless days of no garden, the loops of season I can feel, the solitudes that kiss fear. It is hopeless for you to say, I love you. Your saying so is just an incidence of joy. Solid patience of embracing with desire. That which overflows belongs to all. My window looks out at a wall.
That's a devastating last line, isn't it? My window looks out at a wall. But they're very sensuous poems, Caroline. I was just, he talks about fruit, peaches, plums, nectarines, cherries, pears. I don't think they're on the menu in the prison in Turkey. He seemed, and yet they were very vividly created in his poetry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the shocking thing with İlhan is that it's the little things in a way that he tells us in his letters which really hurt the most. For example, I mean, they don't have they have very bad food. The water is not really potable. He's been in different cells, sharing with different people for many years, and the last 8 years in solitary confinement. Just last week, the guards at 5 a.m. came and rushed in and moved 170 prisoners in his block so that they don't get too familiar or learn the building. He has now had to move cell again. He's only allowed 7 books at a time, 2 T-shirts, 2 pieces of underwear. He has a little budgerigar he's allowed to have, and he said that is the only touch that he has. And one of the things that moved me the most was when he said to us in a letter in February, he said, they unlocked my door 1 hour, 2 hours early the other day. He said, instead of unlocking it at the right time, they unlocked the small door to the yard early in the morning, and he ran outside and saw the sunrise for the first time in 27 years. And it's astonishing that he says it's a miracle that he's still in good health. And it's just, we're very grateful to Irish Pen and to all the poets who've been so generous in writing poems for him. And it does just really show you that those words and that sentiment and that good common feeling can get straight through all of those walls of the highest security prison in Turkey.
Well, that's a very good point, Caroline. I mean, I'm just wondering, we feel so powerless, but what can Pen do, and what can the public do to help this? What would you advise, or what would you recommend? I know that Irish Pen have raised this with certain MEPs, and I'm just wondering, are there other things that Pen, any of the Pens can do, or any of the public if they felt the need?
Yes, I mean, I think I would just say write to him. We are doing advocacy work. We are doing work at the legal level. We're looking into his indictment, and we're going to hopefully support the case of his at the Constitutional Court, which has been languishing there for a long time. And I would just say join Pen. And Pen deals in obviously human rights, freedom of expression, linguistic rights, writers in prison. There's so much, and Irish Pen have been very, very supportive and solid in their support of İlhan Çomak, and we've had such a strong response, and it is effective. I remember once in a Pen Congress, we heard a video from Ino Miomese, who's an Ethiopian poet, I think, who'd been in prison, and he said that the difference that letters and postcards made to him was enormous. He said he was getting them in the sackful, and the guards began to joke with him and treat him a lot better and give him better food and better treatment, because they said, we didn't know you were a VIP, a very important poet. And İlhan has even just finished. İlhan has said he feels more outside than inside prison now. And he's really feels moved by everybody's solidarity, and he can feel it. So thanks to everyone for writing, and please continue to write. I think Irish Pen will be having a Day of the Imprisoned Writer today, an action for sending messages to İlhan.
And is the address available? Is the address of the prison available on the website, on the Pen website?
It is indeed. It's available on the www.ilhanchomach.com website.
I see.
And because I must update it because he was just moved last week. He's had to move to a new cell number. So I will update it and it'll be there for people to access.
Right.
And thank you very much.
Well, Caroline, that is, thank you for giving us a fascinating insight into the plight of İlhan Çomak. It really is a remarkable story, and it's wonderful that you have all the details, including the most up-to-date details as to what he is going through, and yet how he survives, how his spirit survives. And I'm very grateful to you, and obviously also thank you to Liz McManus for her contribution and the translation. We're going to talk about Varavara Rao in a moment, but before that, can I just say that Irish Pen supports writers who are oppressed or imprisoned because of what they write. Our recent focus is also on 3 Uyghur poets, each of them well-known and award-winning: Chairman Gul Awat, Gulmira Amin, and Perhat Tursun. We have lobbied the Chinese government for the release of these 3 poets who have been disappeared by the authorities and incarcerated in so-called re-education centres. Irish Pen believes it is essential to keep present and alive the voices of disappeared writers. One way of doing this is to write into the silence that their disappearance leaves behind. In January of 2022, Irish Pen will hold the first of the several Write to Silence, and that's right, WRITE, to Silence events, where people can contribute letters, poems, short stories or essays to enhance and augment the voices of these disappeared Uyghur poets. If you'd like to be a part of this Irish Pen initiative, please contact us at leah.mills@gmail.com or catherine.dunn@gmail.com, and further information on the latest Uyghur imprisonments is available on the Pen International website. Varavara Rao is an Indian poet. Kate Ennals is now going to read a poem by Varavara called Chains Right Now. Welcome, Kate. And maybe you read Chains Right Now for us.
Lovely, thank you, John. Of course I will. I just want to say that it's such an honour for me to read Varavara Rao's poetry here today. I think that one of the most powerful aspects of Varavara's poetry is his imagery and his descriptions of humanity and hope. Sadly, it's precisely that talent and skill that threatens oppressive regimes and leads up to the imprisonment and torture of writers. But it is in the nature of poets to hold up a mirror to different aspects of humanity, whether it be love, beauty, suffering, cruelty, poverty, or injustice. Varavara does it beautifully, and throughout his life he has done so and displayed great courage in so doing. Now, the first poem I'm going to read is Chains Right, and that's WRITE now, Chains Right. Although it was written in 1975, sadly, it's still appropriate and holds up a mirror to governance today, particularly in Varavara's India. Chains Right Now. So far, blooming flowers and perfumes made me write. Now it is your lies that force me to write the truth. So far, breathless agitations and excitement made me stand up and drove me. Now, my imprisonment and your iron heel make me breathless and turn me into Iron Man. You invaded my world, cut it into small, tiny cells, imprisoned me immobile, and warn, should I infringe. You know, my hand is in the cell, and it is you who tied it down. It is you who broke my pen. But then you are upset as waves of my dreams are spreading as I sit cramped in this dark cell. I am neither the first nor the last in this path that I travel. My songs got their own feet as they took birth on that path. What should I do? You accuse my dreams. I can only laugh at you. You raise high walls around me. My eyes learn to look at the world from the high skies. I was in my routine, my eyes on earth. It was your walls turned me into an introvert, rising high into the skies of winged birds. As much as you move away from people to protect your power, I move towards the belief that people alone can destroy fascism. Even your shadow may not tell you the truth. It may be telling you what you want to hear, but you are alone in the outside world. Here, inside, I am among innumerable people. I am with the strength of my beliefs, with the power of people, like a volcano that erupts lava and fumes in the future, even if it appears silent today. In this long, silent imprisonment, I am honing my thoughts. Dictator, now my chains are writing. Tomorrow I will sing, full-throated in freedom.
Wow. Thank you, Kate. That is a very powerful poem. June Considine is a novelist who has written under her pen name, there's that pen again, Laura Elliott, has written 9 novels and has collaborated as a ghostwriter on a variety of non-fiction books. She's a founder member of Irish Pen, and her 10th novel will be published in March of 2022. June, tell us, who is Varavara Rao, and how would we have heard of him, and why is he where he is now?
Thank you, John. Yes, I'm delighted to have the opportunity to pay tribute to the renowned Indian poet Varavara Rao. I'm going to read an extract from his book of essays, Captive Imagination, and later to read a poem that was written as a tribute to him. But first, I'd like to say a few words about him and what he has achieved throughout his 81 years. He is recognized globally as a revolutionary poet and has been writing poetry for over 60 years. He has also been a translator, a college lecturer, a public speaker, the editor of a literary magazine, and has produced numerous essays on the cultural, literary, and political issues of the day. He has chronicled 5 decades of social history and has been known as a powerful voice for the people, especially the oppressed and the voiceless. His views have seldom tallied with those of the state, and he's been imprisoned many times for expressing them. Over the past 50 years, he has been incarcerated on at least 15 occasions. All cases against him were eventually dropped or withdrawn, but they led to him spending over 7 years of his life in jail, sometimes in solitary confinement. In 2018, he was arrested under India's stringent anti-terror law, the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Along with 15 others for their alleged connection to the Bhima Corrigan case in 2017, he was imprisoned for inciting caste violence, a charge he has always denied. He was still imprisoned when he contracted COVID-19 in July 2020 and almost died. The conditions under which he was treated by the state medical system were appalling, and he was eventually released into the care of his family in March 2021 on a 6-month interim medical bail agreement. This ran out in September, but due to delays in the court system, his hearing has been postponed on a number of occasions. So despite the relief of these short respites, there are serious fears that he will be returned to prison. And as I said earlier, he is 81 years of age and he is in frail health, and there are fears that he will not survive this ordeal.
That's horrifying.
Numerous human rights groups, writers, and individuals have called for Varavara Rao's release. We are doing so on this occasion, and I'd like to thank Dublin Book Festival for inviting us to speak about this remarkable and courageous poet, and for giving us the opportunity to raise our voices in support of all those writers whose words have been silenced by oppression and injustice. The extract I'd like to read from Captive Imagination, which I've abridged slightly for reasons of time, is called All Creatures Great and Small, and in it, he contrasts the constraints of imprisonment against the freedom to fly. All Creatures Great and Small by Varavara Rao. Surely it can't be a pleasant thing for birds as symbols of freedom to be in jail. And yet, how can I claim that they are not cheerful and contented? Whenever I see pigeons inside a jail, I wonder. Memories of bygone days come rushing back when I look into their eyes or watch their movements. And the sight of these pigeons reminds me not of people forgotten, but of the bonds that must be forgotten. Not of past lives, but of the past trapped in the present. When my cell was near the Panzigar gallows, there were pigeons cooing everywhere. Perched on trees, on the wall around the gallows, all around the water tank above the prisoner's kitchen. When I was shifted to this part of the jail in March 1986, there was not a single pigeon here. One summer afternoon, a pigeon fell to the ground, electrocuted by the wires running along the top of the walls. Like a piece of the moon falling to earth, a dead bird fell at my feet. But there was no prince to claim the bird, as in the Jataka tale, nor did I have the power to bring it back to life. But then, I don't understand how these surroundings have grown so congenial over the last 2.5 years, and why there are pigeons everywhere now, in the trees, in the courtyard in front of my cell, on the barracks ventilators, before the staff kitchen, near the water, above the ledges of the barracks, behind my cell. They are everywhere, like blue-grey clouds that have come down from the sky. The sounds, the rustling against the tin window shades, pecking at each other, the fluttering of wings, form a background to the silence of my solitary existence. They have grown so familiar that I have stopped going to the back of my cell, fearing that I may disturb them when I walk briskly in the evening. Sometimes I go there, stepping softly, barefoot, to watch them. Even at night, as I pace inside my cell, I do so in perfect silence, for fear of disturbing the pair of pigeons nesting in the ventilator. One morning, a pigeon sat on the kitchen roof. It looked helpless. It kept fluttering its wings, but wouldn't move when I waved my hand or sprinkled some grain. I took it into my hand and saw that it was badly wounded. I brought it in and fed it. I kept it in the ventilator, safe from the eye and the hunger of the cat. But it died the following morning. As I buried the dead bird under the lemon tree, I remembered the lines I had written within me after the Beirut riots. As I buried the dead bird under the lemon tree, I remembered the lines I had within me after the Meru riots. After visiting Meru, Astur engineer made a significant comment in the Indian Express. He said that while the Muslims told you how many Muslims had died, and the Hindus gave you the number of Hindus dead, the human beings who could tell you how many human beings had died were rare. I wrote, in the land where Valmiki's tears over a dead curlew grew into an epic, in the time of Salim Ali, for whom birds were his eyes and wings and his very life, why this dearth of humans who love other humans? There is an awful silence here in summer, more silence than in other seasons. The sound of changing gears on the road in front of the jail, of vehicles halting, of noises ranging from those of horns to punctures to tire bursts, and sometimes even accidents can be heard. In the midst of this, a cool, drunk on tender and juicy shoots, as the Telugu poet Putana puts it, visits our courtyard, bringing pleasure. A train in the distance, sounds of its arrival and its departure, followed by the quickening throb of its gathering speed. Factory sirens, measuring out workers' lives, signal to me the passing of time. Through it all, cool song, calling sweetly from the top of the mango tree behind my window. Either enamored of the sweetness of its own voice or echoing the song of another coo, the song once begun is without end. These summer evenings are particularly pleasant. Locked up even before sunset, I stand at my window till the star from the corner greets me in the dark, or the moonbeams filter through mango branches from over the prison walls, or the ginty is rung and the radio begins to play, and the invisible cool's spring song reaches my ears. Thank you.
That's wonderful, June, and very well read, if I might say so.
Yes.
It's fascinating to hear again the way that piece riffs off İlhan Çomik's life with his budgerigard, that there are pigeons, and I
Yes.
suppose it's not surprising that they have that in common, that there's birds who kind of, I suppose, the only pets they could have. But it's fascinating to hear that kind of the chiming with each other.
Yes.
And thank you very much. And I know, June, you're going to read for us again another poem later on. Kate Reynolds is back, and Kate, who is herself a prize-winning poet and writer, and her latest collection is due next week. Kate, you have a poem by Varavara, I think, called Women, or Woman, sorry. Maybe you'd explain it to us and then read it to us, please?
Well, yes, of course. I've just been amazed going through Varavara's poetry at the range of subjects and issues that he covers. And I was surprised to find so many of his poems actually taking up the cause of women. And I love the earthiness about this one in particular. It's called Woman.
Sure.
Woman, your blood turns into a child, a blend of your dreams and his passions. Woman, your blood infuses life into hungry children. Woman, your blood sweats into pearls in the house, in the kitchen, in the field, in the grains, yet still you are a slave in the system. You are the shadow spreading silently along the wall of male arrogance, which confines your individuality. Every pleasure in the world needs to be purchased. Only you require and favor with bliss. You offer not merely delight, but dominance over you. One who plunders you offering jasmine flowers or a good sari is the benevolent husband. One who shares with you a charming smile or a sweet word is a lover. All that is lost in life is yours, and all the gain goes to the man. It is true you are half of life. In the drama of joy and grief, your part is grief. Woman, you cannot overthrow this system with tears. You must bathe it in bluish flames of fury. You must thunder for your rights, step in unison with the marching feet on the path of revolution. From out of the system that looks upon you as a pleasurable object, towards a setup which makes you a force, an individual, and join hands in the pledge of revolution. Without the rise of revolutionary sun in your heart too, there cannot be a triumph.
That certainly puts some of us in our place.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm feeling a bit lonely and isolated. But I love that, you know, you cannot overthrow the system with tears. You must bathe it in bluish flames of fury. I love the bluish. I mean, it's so vivid and so immediate, a very, very evocative image. June, you have a poem by Tishani Doshi. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly.
Well, we're delighted to have permission from this award-winning poet, Tishani Doshi, to read this poem, and she has written it as a tribute to Varavara Rao. And it's called, This May Reach You Either as a Bird or Flower, for Varavara Rao. Sooner or later, we must return to the rooms from which we emerged. The earth of your childhood is the earth of mine, even though it may seem we live in two different countries. You are a dangerous poet in yours. I am trying to be one. In every republic, there will be some who walk down to the water with life vests and bread, while others lead soldiers to trapdoors in the cellar. You stand at the edge, beating a drum. They say you've been standing there for 60 years, drumming, drumming. Sir, are you warm? Are the crows bringing you the latest news? The mobs haul bodies from beyond the campfires, with leaves tacked to their eyes and throats filled with dust. You should know there's been a breach. The curtain is not made of iron. The offspring of your arrests have formed their own political party in prison and are spreading rebellious thoughts like a virus refreshed after the summer rest. We must consolidate while there's oxygen left. A day will come when we are gathered in a courtyard for a historic photo and asked to denounce the pawns, the black and white squares, the horses and rooks, everyone but to the crooks. It will no longer be possible to say your homeland is not my homeland because it doesn't speak English. The language we love will be thrown in a ditch. A country forgets how many countries it's been. Nothing is gentle about memory. Sky speaks in howl. Grass whispers back. We are already on our knees. What else can we do?
That's wonderful. That is an amazing line. A country forgets how many countries it's been. It's such a universal line, and I suppose it has resonances for everybody, for all countries. Kate, you have a poem to finish. I think it's a poem called "Rising Sun" again by Varavara, and maybe you'd introduce it to us.
Yeah, it's a very short poem and it was written in 1978. My favourite line, again, is the last line. It fills me with so much hope. Okay, Rising Sun. Oh, enemy, in the wee hours of one fine morning, after tying behind the back the hands that fought for sunrise, after blindfolding the eyes that looked for sunrise, after putting the noose around the throat that spoke for sunrise, after pulling the trigger, you turned to the east, only to find the sky blood red. In that crimson lap,
that is a great finishing line.
Just opened.
And you wanted to say something about Varavara to conclude this section.
Well, yeah, I just think he's such a courageous man and a brave poet. I really feel that his shoes are big, but there's space enough for many of us to stand there with him. And his poetry it's a balm. It's full of splendid, glorious, vivid images. And so I think it really does provide humanity with courage, solidarity, and hope. That's all I want to say, really,
well,
and just to thank him for writing.
And while we're on the subject of inspiration and providing us with hope, can I remind people of the Poetry Jukebox? There is a Poetry Jukebox edition curated for Irish Pen, which is going to include translated work by international imprisoned writers. I'll just give you a brief extract. There's a very short poem, "The Revolution is in the Heart," and it goes, "They shoot in the head, but they don't know the revolution is in the heart." That's by Ket Thai from Myanmar, who is one of the imprisoned writers who was killed by the military forces in Myanmar. But there'll be translated work by other international imprisoned writers, Varavara Rao, İlhan Çomak, Perhat Tursun, who is the Uyghur poet from China, and journalist Paula Ugaz from Peru. And these poets will be read by contemporary writers from Ireland and elsewhere. Poetry Jukebox will be available on the on-street audio installations at the Crescent Arts Centre in Belfast and at the Epic Museum in Dublin from today, the 15th of November. The project is part of an international collaboration between Irish Pen, the Belfast-based company Quotidian Word on the Street, and Ondřej Kobza, the inventor of the Poetry Jukebox in the Czech Republic. Well, Thanks to the Dublin Book Festival, to Caroline Stockford, to Theo Dorgan, to Liz McManus, to Kate Ennals and June Considine, but above all, to İlhan Sami Çomak and Varavara Rao and all the other imprisoned writers. Remember, you are not forgotten. Thank you.